Another part of the Cold War was something called the space race, and the Soviets were the first to send a satellite and an astronaut into space, and this terrified Americans, and it meant that they had the technology to possibly launch nuclear missiles instead of flying planes. Missiles were much more threatening. However, the U.S. was the first to land on the moon. Now here is a picture of the former Soviet Union, and something to understand about it is the idea of communism. Now, communism is an economic system where property and businesses are owned by the government for the benefit of all citizens. Now, this image right here, the hammer and sickle, is a symbol of communism. And there was fear in the US of being accused of being a communist. Now, communist nations were the Soviet Union, although it's no longer called the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, and Vietnam. There were other countries that were moving in that direction. Now, one aspect of that is the way the United States and Japan and the Soviet Union competed with each other was with other countries at fighting these proxy wars. So one was between North Korea and South Korea. So a little bit of background, you've probably heard of Kim Jong-un, but Korea has been basically ruled by dictators that were succeeded by their parents from 1948 till now. So first there was Kim Il-sung, then there was Kim Jong-il, and then his son Kim Jong-un, which maybe you hear about occasionally. Now, the Korean War basically was about who gets to control Korea. And for a while, it was divided here. There was a North Korea and a South Korea. And attacks first happened from the north, and they eventually captured most of the south here, till it was just this small area that UN forces had. Eventually, the UN, supported by the US, came back and captured most of Korea. However, China jumped in. China felt very threatened by this because it was sharing a border, and then eventually pushed it back. And now there's sort of this demarcation line where there's still the North and the South, and technically this war has never really ended. And even to this day, as you may know, the United States has a great deal of tension with North Korea. South Korea is a very strong country economically, an ally of the United States. North Korea, very kind of a depressed country with limited opportunities. Another aspect of the Cold War was the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War happened in 1955 to 1975, or about 20 years. And the US supported South Vietnam and sent troops here to stop the spread of communist forces in the North. North Vietnam was supported by China and the Soviet Union. Now, some Americans began to question the US presence in Vietnam. Eventually, the communist North took over South Vietnam and the United States withdrew. And many Vietnamese, Lao, Thai, Hmong, and Cambodian people were able to move to the United States as refugees of war because they were supporting the United States efforts here. About 58,000 US troops died in Vietnam. And there's much more to say about Vietnam, but this is a crash course right now, so wish I could teach you more about it. In your assignment today, I asked you to complete one of these prompts. So after learning that blank, so something, what is it something you wonder about? Or after learning blank, you think what? Or something interesting thing I learned was blank, and I wonder if this is different today. So I'd like you to complete this prompt. I am going to be using this slideshow later for the test, for the assessment for World War II and for the Cold War. So I do want you to be familiar with it, and it's something that you will come back to. Until then, I hope you guys have a good one. Bye-bye.